Hello, I'm Cedric Bradford Glover, and I'm a candidate for Senate District 39. I currently occupy the seat of state representative from the 4th Representative District and have had the opportunity and privilege over the course of my life to have served as mayor of the city of Shreveport, state representative prior to that, and before that to be one of your city council members. Along the course of that journey, I've also had a chance to be a part of the staffing industry and have been a part of trying to help to grow and build Shreveport into a better place. I'm running for state senator from District 39 because Northwest Louisiana is at a very critical juncture in its history. If you look at the arc of this region over the last 50 years, our population has at best been stagnant. There have been some areas that have seen a shift and a growth, expansion of population, but largely at the expense of the loss of population within the city of Shreveport and Caddo Parish. That in and of itself does not represent growth. I'm running because in order for this region to be able to effectively access the kind of resources and opportunities that are needed to be able to be an effective part of the state of Louisiana, you need to have someone who holds this position that knows exactly how to go and be effective within the course of that process. I have the years of experience and the record of accomplishment of being able to not only pass difficult legislation that has historically been shown to be beneficial to this area, but I've also shown the ability to be able to deliver the resources needed for us to be able to take advantage of our opportunities and to address our challenges. And so having the opportunity to be able to elevate my service from the House to the Senate, where there's a greater access to power, a greater ability to be able to impact and affect change, I think gives us a chance to be able to give Northwest Louisiana a chance to be able to once again be the kind of place that can keep its children home and also provide and develop and cultivate the kind of opportunity that can attract new people here. When you look at Caddo Parish specifically, we are essentially the same size as we were a half a century ago, 230,000 people. But the age of that population is much older now. Why? Because our children and our grandchildren are in places like Dallas and Houston and Atlanta and in Charlotte and other places outside of this region. Why are they there? Because there is a lack of opportunity here. We need leadership that understands that and is willing to go to Baton Rouge and fight to be able to make a difference. It's great to be able to get along. It's great to be able to be popular with other folks. But the most important priority for me has always been service to the people who have trusted me to go and be one of their representatives and to do all that I can to be able to bring back what's needed in order to be able to make this region a better, stronger, safer, and greater place. That's why I'm running to be the next senator from District 39. I think the first thing that we need to do is to recognize that that is a trend that is much longer and much broader than just the last decade. Again, if you recognize that over the last 50 years, when the state of Louisiana grew by 1 million people, by 27%, the state of Texas tripled in size. If you look at the states of Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, even Alabama, Mississippi, and Arkansas, all of them within the last half century have grown at much higher rates than the state of Louisiana. Our challenges, our problems, our obstacles extend beyond just the last decade. We've got to be willing to stop and look at ourselves directly in the mirror and even, I think, extend that look back beyond just the last half century. If you go back a century ago to 1923, New Orleans was the largest city in the South and was prepared to be the capital of the South going well into the 20th century. Unfortunately, that did not happen. By the time you got to the middle of the 20th century. You begin to see other places, the Atlantas, the Charlottes, the Dallases, the Houstons, begin to take over not just Shreveport, but those states take over Louisiana as a whole. We need to be willing to look back honestly and earnestly at who we are and what we are, and understand while it's great to be wonderful at food and entertainment and tourism and football, of course, it's also time for us to become smarter. To become the kind of state that places a higher value and premium on education, that understands that if we want to see something different than where we are right now, we're going to have to do things differently. And that is by recognizing it's not just a short window. It's a very long window. It's been a very long journey that has gotten us to this point. And if we expect to turn it around, we've got to be willing to look at all of it, to unpack all of it, and then do that which is different and takes us in a better direction. You've got to be willing to go to Baton Rouge and fight for it, and develop the kind of relationships that allow you to be able to work with your colleagues there to help deliver that. But first and foremost, you've got to be very clear about what your objective is, and that is that you want to go and ensure that you bring back to Shreveport those things that are needed and necessary to be able, and not just Shreveport, but Northwest Louisiana, those resources that are needed and necessary to be able to address the infrastructure challenges that we have here. And then you also need to be willing to have an open and honest conversation about how it is that we're going to try and figure out how we pay for those things as well. Because as you look at us going into the future and you recognize that you have an increase in the utilization of electrical vehicles and what have you, which means you end up with a corresponding reduction in gas taxes for roads, means that you've got to figure out different and better ways to make sure that you've got the resources necessary to be able to do what's needed to improve our infrastructure here. Then you've also got to be able to think outside of the box and recognize that there are pools of resources that can be advanced and addressed at the federal level, and work with your congressional delegation as well as the administration in Washington, D.C. To be able to put forth what our priorities are. But first and foremost, you've got to recognize that your first duty, your greatest obligation, is to go to Baton Rouge and to represent the interests and the priorities of Shreveport, Bossier, and Northwest Louisiana, and be willing to roll up your sleeves and do all that is necessary in order to be able to ensure that that happens. As an example, just within the course of this most recent legislative session, I was able to secure an appropriation for $41 million for what I call the Shreveport Healthcare and Innovation Quarter along Kings Highway, representing the area of our city that has the greatest potential in the near future and far future in helping us to be able to grow, evolve, advance, and expand our economy by investing in something that's always going to be needed, and that's healthcare, and healthcare that is provided at the highest level, and that also has the ability to be able to spin off additional opportunities in research, development, manufacturing, and what have you. And so investing those dollars along Kings Highway is what gives us a chance to be able to move in that direction. And just as a member of the House of Representatives, I was able to accomplish that. I believe that given the opportunity and privilege of being the senator from the 39th District, we'll be able to do even more. I think our challenge is to make it flatter and to make it fairer so that we end up with an overall lower tax base, but one that ends up being applicable to more people and that gives them the inability to be able to avoid paying what it is that others should be paying, that all of us should be paying as well. So I think it should be flatter and it should be fairer and give us the kind of ability to be able to have the predictable revenue streams so that we know from year to year to year exactly how to build our budgets, exactly how to prioritize, and exactly how to move in a direction that allows us to be able to plan beyond these 2 and 5 year cycles that we're on right now with these various temporary taxes that we are imposing upon ourselves. Part of what that requires is the willingness and the ability to make hard decisions. And of course, that's one of the biggest challenges I think that new people have and some folks have in terms of being a part of the legislative process. And that is they don't understand that you get a chance to be able to campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose, which means you end up having to deal with some very hard, practical realities that you have to be willing to step up. Make sure you commit yourself to understanding, do the best you can in terms of trying to understand what is best, what is fair, and then step forward and be willing to do that which is going to be best for the state of Louisiana. The one thing that we should recognize in this regard, that it probably represents one of the types of issues, especially when you look at us in comparison to our neighbor just to the west and some of the other places throughout our southern region, that we've got to figure out how to get our revenue generation models into a much better posture so that it facilitates the ability to be able to become the kind of place that can attract the kind of investments, that can create the kind of jobs that we need to be able to keep people here and attract others to come in. And so it's a matter of being able to commit yourself to understanding the issue, to being willing to take a hard stance if necessary, but to ultimately recognize that where we are right now has gotten us where we are. And if we want to see and do better, we've got to be willing to do so. The power of convening is one of the greatest powers that you have when you happen to serve within a political capacity. And the higher you are up on that particular chain, the greater your ability to be able to bring people together. So as a senator, and certainly whomever ends up being the next governor, should see it as a priority to be able to bring all of the various stakeholders, all of the various providers, all of the various entities that are presently out here involved within the early childhood education spectrum and get them together so that we can try and figure out how we best align the assets and resources that we have right now. I think if you look at our present situation, you have various groups that are doing all great work, but none of them appear to be aligned in a way that are allowing them to be able to get maximum result from the resource provided. It's always typical of what happens when we function within silos. And so you've got the locally provided early childhood education on one hand, you've got the federally funded Head Start program somewhere else, you've got the other private sector programs that are going on, but you have little capacity to be able to know exactly what all of those are doing all at the same time, and to whether or not there's any replication and duplication of efforts. I think what we should do is have the kind of leadership that's willing to bring those folks into the room, get them all at the table, and then everybody share, here's what we do, here's how we do it, and see where you can find the commonalities, the common grounds, and the common connections that allows you to be able to build a better, more effective system. It's one of the fundamental challenges that we have right now because of our stagnant population. The lack of population means that the pool of talent is diminished unless we're trying to play football. In that regard, we're great and we do very well. But when it comes to the rest of our workforce, the ability to be able to have the kind of people that you need becomes more difficult as you end up with fewer and fewer folks. And so I think part of the challenge that we have as a state is to figure out, one, how is it that we unpack the chicken or the egg scenario that we're in the midst of. But one of the things I think that have been proven is that our fast start efforts have been effective in terms of being able to work with employers as we bring them into the state, especially our new ones, as well as a commitment to our existing ones, our incumbent worker programs and what have you, that have been effective in helping to provide the kind of incentives for employers to provide the kind of training that's necessary. But it, again, all boils down to the need for us as a state to once again become a place that is a destination as opposed to a place to be from. Is when we once again posture ourselves as being a destination that we bring in that fresh talent, those fresh people, that fresh group of folks who can come here and help us to be able to address the workforce needs that we have, fulfill the opportunities, and then begin to help us grow our cities and grow our communities by adding children to our school systems and people to our communities. And we become, once again, the kind of place, the kind of state that's opposed to having a stagnant population projection that we end up going on the increase once again. I don't think that's a fear. I think that's a reality. I think you only have to look at the capital outlay bill every year or the appropriations bill every year and to see the number of projects that end up in other parishes and other regions outside of Northwest Louisiana. And I think it's going to be absolutely imperative, especially when you factor in that for the first time in over 50 years, Shreveport, Bossier, and Northwest Louisiana is going to go from having 4 members of the state Senate between Shreveport and Bossier to only 3. And so it's going to be very important that you have someone who has a documented history of being able to go to Baton Rouge and effectively fight for the resources that we need for this region. And I would point to simply as an example of what it is that I bring to the table in that regard is this past legislative cycle where we've been able to deliver over $158 million in funding for projects within this region, the biggest of which is fully funded, and that's $75 million for the new Northwest Louisiana State Building that's going into downtown Shreveport. That project is fully funded. I happen to be the only Democratic member of this legislative delegation who was for that project. So not only did I have to fight against the balance of the state of Louisiana, I had to fight in many respects against my own region in order to be able to deliver that project to this area. It is now already underway. Construction fencing is up. The demolition process has begun, and within the span of the next 2 years, that building, which has been empty for almost 30 years, will once again be open, have over 600 workers assigned to it with hundreds of folks coming in and out of it every day. It will revolutionize the northern side of our downtown. That is the kind of proven, documented proof of the kind of leadership that I provided as a member of the legislature, as a member of the House. Given the opportunity to be elevated up to the Senate, I think we'll be able to do much, much more. I believe we need to be all of the above. Obviously, we are blessed to be one of the regions that has an abundance of natural gas and oil, and we need to continue to be able to ensure that those minerals are effectively and efficiently extracted so that they end up being able to do all of the good that they can in terms of helping to grow and advance and elevate this region. At the same time, we also need to realize that there are other aspects of the energy sector that are growing and expanding, and we need not get left behind in that regard. As I heard one of the executives say, with regard to why his automotive company sold electrical vehicles, and someone who was within the power tool industry said why they sold electrical power tools now. Said, we don't do it because it's good for the environment, we do it because it's good for business. And so the reality is that that sector right now, it's growing, it's expanding. The likelihood is that it's going to get bigger. And if you want to have an appreciation for exactly what that means, how many of us have gone from, gas-powered blowers and other tools around our houses to having one that we plug on that little battery pack and manage to be able to get the kind of effective and efficiency that we never would have thought would have come from something that was battery operated. So if we need any better indication of the reality that change is coming, then it's right there within our own households. And so it's not a matter of having to choose either or. It's a matter of being able to ensure that Northwest Louisiana benefits from any of the options that are available to us. I think, first of all, locally, we need to get together and get on the same page and make sure that we speak in one voice once we get to Baton Rouge in terms of what it is that we want to do to effectively address this challenge. The ability to be able to address these issues more effectively is something that was detailed at great length within the 2030 master plan. It made a recommendation that one of the things that we needed to do was to go to Baton Rouge, introduce legislation to create a redevelopment authority here for the city of Shreveport. We have one of those. Unfortunately, in many respects, it's very different than the ones that are currently in place in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Lafayette, and Lake Charles. And so it means that we don't have the same abilities to be able to do some of the things with regard to addressing blight and adjudicated properties that those other cities can. And so, but one of the things that's very important to remember right now, it is a very crucial factor in terms of what's going to happen with the current Old State building that's at 1525 Fairfield, because based upon legislation I passed in 2022, that particular building is going to be handed over in terms of its effective repurposing to the Shreveport Redevelopment Authority. We need to make sure that that entity has the ability to be able to do what's necessary in terms of achieving highest and greatest use of that asset. But we also need to examine it to make sure that it has the ability to serve as an effective mechanism to allow us to be able to go into the Allendales, the Queensboroughs, and the other central city neighborhoods that we have right now that have property that is awaiting the opportunity to be put back into commerce. But again, as mentioned, because of all of the Byzantine laws and things that are in place right now, make it very, very difficult for us to do anything effectively. So it's possible for us to be able to make progress on a local issue like this in Baton Rouge, but it will be crucial that we end up having a consensus amongst both the delegation as well as the local community in terms of what that actually looks like once we get to the point of advancing legislation down in Baton Rouge. Well, the first obligation of government is to keep its people safe. And so as a councilman, as a representative, as a mayor, and once again as a representative, it's always been my highest priority to be a part of trying to make Shreveport, Bossier, and Northwest Louisiana the safest place they can be for its citizens. Obviously, right now, we are in the midst of a very challenging set of circumstances in that regard, not only in Shreveport, but across the state and many parts of the country. And so one of the things I think you also need to have in terms of who is going to be your next state senator for District 39 is someone who also understands that there is a direct connection between every level of government in that pact, in that commitment to work together cooperatively and conjunctively to ensure that we look at what's happening within our neighborhoods and across the streets of our city, and that we're doing all that we can to keep the people of Shreveport, Bossier, and Northwest Louisiana safe. I'm the only candidate in this race who has a documented history of being able to do that. The 8 years that I served as mayor represent the 8 lowest years of homicide and violent crime and other crimes ever recorded in Shreveport history. We've also gone back to Baton Rouge, passed legislation that's helped to keep people safer as well by addressing issues involving domestic violence. I'm also committed as the senator to continuing that vigilance and to being the kind of leader that helps to continue to open up and keep those connections that allow us to recognize that any problem that affects our collective constituency is all of our problem, and that we have no higher priority than figuring out how it is that we once again return Shreveport, Bossier, and Northwest Louisiana into the kind of safe place where people can feel comfortable in their neighborhoods and believe that when they leave their families at home, there's going to be some place that'll be safe and they'll come back and return to them in the same condition that they left them. And so that's why I'm seeking the opportunity to be able to be your next state senator. That's one of the particular intangibles I think that I bring to this effort that no other candidate does. And given the opportunity, I'll do all I can to make sure that we end up making Shreveport, Bossier, and Northwest Louisiana a safer, better, and greater place to call home.